recently received a friend request that reminded me of this story, so I'm going to share it here. This happened after I went to university, so I was 18. I made an effort to make friends after I moved onto campus, and ended up with a few groups to hang out with, including a new girlfriend, and plenty of people from my classes that I liked well enough. There was one class before lunch where it was traditional for people to go to the cafeteria afterwards to eat in pairs or threes. I wasn't very discerning about who I'd have lunch with because I got on fine with most people from the class, and we were all trying to make an effort to be social. So when one girl, Lily, asked if I wanted to eat lunch together after the class, I didn't have any reason not to go. We talked about school and that kind of thing, nothing noteworthy, but she did ask me to get lunch with her again the next week. It became a pattern, and there wasn't exactly a way to start suddenly saying no. It was fine, but it did not mean I lost the chance to eat lunch with anyone else on those days. In hindsight, I suppose that was the point. One day in class, I asked someone if I could add them on social media. This happened in front of Livy. I saw her face jerk towards me from a couple of seats over. It was such a sharp reaction that it was hard to ignore, and I still remember it. By the time I got home later that day, Lily had sent me a friend request. No friends in common. Don't know how she knew my last name. I was a bit surprised, but I guess she just dug through the university's social media pages and found me through there. It gave me a bad feeling, but surely it was fine. She ended up messaging me a lot and commenting on anything I posted. I told myself that she was just awkward, and we became friends, if not close. I'd certainly known worse people. She still always got me to eat lunch with her after our one shared class. Other than that, we rarely spent time together in person. I saw her around sometimes, but I never went out of my way to hang out with her. So it was mostly online messaging and seeing each other in group settings. Coincidentally, my girlfriend was also called Lily. This was something that clearly bothered Lily. Not my girlfriend, who couldn't have found it less interesting. It's a common name. She occasionally hinted that she wanted my girlfriend to pick a different name, or joked about her not suiting it. She clearly didn't like my girlfriend at all, and I had an idea of why. It was hard to ignore by this point. Lily was starting to unsubtly hint that she had a crush on me. I try not to address it because what was I going to say? I've never known what to do when a friend makes a pass at me. I was also not interested in the least. Even ignoring the weird stuff she pulled, Lily was not my type at all. She tended to dress and act in a way somewhere between a 50s housewife and one of those adults who's still obsessed with Disney princesses, if you can picture that. Things took an uncomfortable turn on the day of our last shared class of the year. Instead of asking me to lunch like she usually did, Lily asked if I'd go for a walk with her. Again, I didn't really know how to refuse, so I said all right. Our campus was bordered by a large patch of woodland. Lily led me into the woods, and the sounds of our fellow students slowly faded away. She sat down on a log, and I joined her. She started talking about how she was going to miss me over the summer. I tried placating her, but I didn't want to be there, especially because she seemed almost on the verge of tears. I think I tried to make an excuse about having plans with my girlfriend, but before I could leave, Lily chose to kiss me without warning. It was uncomfortable to say the least. I got out there and was happy to think I wouldn't see her for a while. I came back to university after the summer, moving into a house with my friends. Without going off topic, there were some serious issues in my friend group, a lot of petty arguing, and worse. I broke up with my girlfriend around the start of that school year as well, and basically the whole mess made me recontextualise things with Lily, because suddenly it didn't seem as bad. That said, I didn't want to be alone with her. We mostly talked online. She was still constantly messaging me, after all. One upside of everything was that I started dating a boy. Lily was not pleased to hear that news. I think she hoped to sneak in after I broke up with my girlfriend, but as I said before, that was never going to happen. There wasn't a big gap between my breakup and this new relationship, so she must have thought she missed her chance to be with me. This is where the story gets bad. At this time, I was fairly active on Tumblr. I occasionally talked about my life and mostly reblogged photos and stuff. I was on there one day and something odd happened. One of the blogs I followed had received an ask with some phrases I recognised. It took a second to register that it was taken from my About page. This made me freeze. I read the message properly. Someone was asking this completely random person to analyse a section of text from my page, asking for their opinion on the type of person who would write it. I cannot stress how messed up it was to see people talking about me like I was a character in a book they were trying to study. The reply was basically, "I don't know, sorry." But the important thing was that the question hadn't been anonymous. It linked to someone's blog. Obviously, I wanted to know who had taken such a bizarre interest in me. As far as I know, no one in real life, other than my boyfriend, knew about my page. Well, no prizes for guessing who was behind it. What I found was like a shrine. She was using a fake name, but I recognised Lily all over that thing. It was this cutesy pink and red page. There were a few posts about her interests, but most of the content was focused on her primary interest. Me. Most of the posts were about me. There were accounts of things I'd done recently. He told me such and such, he went to a nightclub recently, etc. As well as references to things from as far back as I'd known her. It was clearly she'd been keeping tabs on me, both online and offline, gathering up every scrap of information she could about my life and hoarding it in for her collection. She talked about us eating lunch together and how special our dates had been to her, as if it was anything more than acquaintances getting food after class. She talked about the time she had forcibly kissed me in the woods, but she wrote it as if it had been mutual. She quoted lyrics from my favourite song and talked about how she'd always be there for me, no matter who else came into my life. Lots of references to loving me just the way he is. Which answered another mystery about an anonymous letter I'd received earlier that year with the same wording. It got worse. There were a lot of posts about my boyfriend as well. These weren't so nice. They got vicious, talking about how he didn't deserve me. He didn't know what he had. If she was with me, she'd be jealous of anyone else who came near me. So my boyfriend not being a jealous person meant he didn't love me. It was angry and hateful. I didn't like to think about the sort of person who could write so obsessively, being fixated on me. One thing that didn't make sense at first was that the blog also made plenty of references to Lily's best friend, Stephen. She'd never mentioned this person to me. Her posts talked a lot about Stephen, and how great a friend he was, how much fun they had together, how he looked out for her, etc. I was trying to work out whether this was an online friend, when one specific post made it all click. She had posted a photo and captioned it with, "Stephen sent this to me, he knew I would like it and I'd love it," or something like that. The problem was, the photo was taken from my own page. I hadn't sent it to her. She took it from my page and then claimed this fictional best friend of hers shared it with her, because in her head, she'd split me into two people. In her messed up fantasy life, I was both the perfect best friend who was always looking out for her, and her soulmate who was bound to end up with her when I finally got over my sweet, kind boyfriend and all the other easy girls I hung out with that she made dozens of posts complaining about. Who was she complaining to? Oh, Lily had an audience. She asked open questions about me and her relationship with me and got messages back from her followers. People who took what she said at face value. I saw a bunch of random people agreeing with the stalker that my boyfriend didn't deserve me and we were bound to break up soon so I could be with Lily. The person I was clearly supposed to be with, she had this fake fanfiction version of my life up for anyone to share their opinion on. and she'd made herself out to be the hero of it all. I went maybe a month back into this page's history. I did not look at everything that was there. It was too much, so I'm not sure how long this had been going on. I sent Lily a message confronting her about the blog. She said nothing, and I cannot stress how weird it was to have found pages and pages dedicated to me, with her talking about how she was in love with me and would make sure we ended up together, slamming my boyfriend, and building a fantasy life with two different versions of me in it that she clearly believed to be real. Then acting like it hadn't happened. She said nothing. She didn't address it. She just changed the subject, even after I pushed, and it was like she hadn't even registered what I said. I'd never seen anything else like it. She deleted the page, of course, or at least changed the name and hid it so I never found it again. It wasn't the end though. I was going to hang out with her anymore, but we were still shoved together in classes, and she had started to actually scare me with what she might do next. I'm kind of a paranoid person. Knowing someone was obsessively keeping track of me for who knows how long freaked me out. The next thing she pulled was trying to seduce my boyfriend. It was an absolutely useless attempt that only made him uncomfortable. He told me about it right away. What was the plan there? Did she hope to tell me he cheated and wait for me to break up with him? Why would I want her after that? When that didn't work out for her, she tried hitting on 3 of my other friends. None of them took the bait. She ended up dating one of my former housemates for a while, but made sure to send me messages while they were together, letting me know she'd rather be with me. No thanks. Lily made sure to stay in my life the whole time I was at university. There was a time when I tried to pull away from her, and she ended up starting rumours about me and damaging a career opportunity I put a lot of work into. I don't know what else she did behind my back, but it made me realise it was safer to let her think she was part of my life while ignoring her, rather than doing something that would cause her to get angry. After I graduated, Lily still wanted to spend time together, but I knew I didn't have to now. I made excuses about work and barely talked to her after that point. I almost entirely stopped posting on social media that I knew she knew about. Of course, she didn't give up that easily. She tried to start conversations, asked me to meet up with her, attempts I usually ignored. I didn't like to think she was still tracking me online, but she probably was. I don't know how, but she'd occasionally reference things I mentioned online somewhere she shouldn't have known about. The last time we had a real conversation, she sent me a message out of nowhere. We hadn't spoken at all in months, and we hadn't talked about anything serious in much longer than that. Thinking about that conversation still makes my skin crawl, but I'll summarise what happened. At first, she asked me some questions about how long had I known I was queer. I told her some basic stuff, the kind of thing I'd tell anyone who asked. Then she changed the subject. She started talking about how would I feel about her if she was a boy, about wanting to be a boy for me. The messages quickly became fetishistic. She went into plenty of detail about fantasies she had with the 2 of us. Again, we were not friends at this point. We'd never been especially close, at least not from my perspective, and we'd barely spoken for years. I can't imagine sending messages like that to even a close friend, let alone someone who barely knows you. I tried telling her not to pull this crap with me, but she decided to change tactics. She sent photos of herself, followed by a bunch of messages, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, way too fast for me to reply before the next one arrived. Basically quoting back what I'd told her about myself and my past earlier. She was telling me these things as if they had happened to her. She was role-playing as me. The worst part was that she seemed to believe it was real, that those things actually had happened to her, even when she was quoting me word for word. Things I'd told her only hours before were now her life. It was like she was trying to absorb my history, to take it over, to take my life part of her. Yeah, I didn't talk to her again after that. I ignored future attempts she made to talk to me, and I eventually silently deleted her from the inactive social media, which was her only real way of contacting me. I really thought she might finally move on. A few days ago, she sent me a friend request. It's sitting there unanswered, because I know if I delete it, she'll only send another one. Lily and I met nearly 12 years ago. This story is just the highlights, and even then, it's only the stuff I know about for sure. A lot happened behind my back. I know it did. So, girl who spent 12 years obsessing over me, fetishizing me, stalking me, and harassing me, let's not meet again. The fantasy life you built for the two of us in your head is the only place you'll be seeing me anytime soon. My girlfriend, Hannah, works in a hospital as a surgeon, and she's so busy, it's hard to see each other. So we do what we both can to see each other. When my girlfriend wants to see me, and the same with me, I straight away get myself hurt. I broke my arm a couple of months ago, and as I got sent to the hospital, my girlfriend stitched me all up and mended my broken bone. It was so wonderful to see each other. It's unfortunate, but it's the best we can do right now. Then, a couple of weeks later, my girlfriend Josephine wanted to see me, and being a nurse is so hard. A nurse is always so busy and hardly gets any break at all. I hadn't seen Josephine in a long time, so I got myself into a car crash, and I woke to find Josephine mending me and comforting me. It was so wonderful and better than any date I have ever had. We talked and laughed, and I was so glad to be alive. Josephine is such a wonderful person, and I'm glad that she's in my life. Then, a couple of weeks later, my girlfriend Sophie wanted to see me. She's a doctor, and is so busy dealing with so many patients. She was desperate to see me, so I got myself stabbed by some crazy guy, and I ended up in hospital where Sophie was checking up on me. It was so wonderful, it truly was, and I was so glad that we know each other. I was going to be fine, and it was totally worth it to get stabbed so that I could see Sophie. Then, a couple of weeks later, all three of my girlfriends that I am secretly seeing in the same hospital, they all texted me. They so desperately wanted to see me. I have decided to blow myself up with a bomb, so each of them can see a bit of me. That was their suggestion, not mine. And I feel it would be so romantic. Oh, puberty. What a time for the kids and the parents. The never-ending mood swings, and they grow up so fast into their adulthood. My wife and I have 6 kids, and before you ask, we could afford each and one of them, or otherwise we wouldn't have had kids. Anyhow, our youngest, who is now 21, is currently going through his 5th puberty. And as parents, we feel so blessed to see our youngest child, Eric, grow and change again. Eric was a bit of a late bloomer at 16. When he first went through puberty, he gained a deep voice and became taller and hairier. We couldn't believe that our youngest was now entering adulthood. As parents, when you see your child going through puberty, it's kind of a relief because you got them this far. Then at 17, Eric went through puberty again and became even taller and gained sharp teeth and claws. His ears started to grow out like elves, and he ate his older sister, who was our 5th oldest child. We didn't blame Eric for eating his sister, as we blamed it on puberty. Then at 18 years old, Eric went through puberty again, and his appearance took on more changes as he grew a tail and became even hairier. His face became more defined, like between a werewolf and a skinwalker. He ate his older brother this time, who is our 4th oldest child. We blamed it on puberty, as hunger can grow so much during puberty. Then at 19, he went through his 3rd round of puberty, and he was able to walk on walls and see in the dark. He grew wings and was able to speak many languages through verbal and telepathic means. Oh, the changes children go through. He killed his older brother, who was our third oldest child. Then at 20, he went through puberty again for a fourth time. He grew even taller, and his claws and teeth were more defined, and his tongue stretched out even more. He could also move things with his mind. He ate his other older sister, who was our second oldest child. At 21, he had gone through his fifth puberty and had become so muscular overnight to the point he was like a bodybuilder. His knees and elbows have a knife-like shape. Our oldest child was frightened, and he was arguing with us to get rid of Eric. My wife and I both laughed, telling our eldest child that Eric is just going through his fifth puberty. You know, every workplace has the toilet problem, where managers and owners are timing employees as to how long they use the toilets. Well, our company, being innovative and forward-thinking, we decided that each of our employees will be sitting on a toilet as their seat. So, as they are working, if they need to go, well, they just let it go. Because of this, we've separated females and males due to privacy issues. It's saved so much wasted time and wasted money, and for the smell problem, well, the toilet seats have been filled with automatic sprays. We thought that this was the way forward for all companies. The toilets also flush automatically. Then one day, within the female section of the workplace, because people are letting it rip so freely as they are working, some of the pregnant female employees accidentally gave birth within the toilet seats. And long story short, the toilets flushed their newborns. It was absolutely horrific, and to make matters worse, because the toilets are all connected, some of the flushed newborns have been finding their way into other toilets. It's been a complete disaster, and so the CEO made up a cunning plan to get rid of pregnant female staff, so to never have this problem ever again. Then, just as things couldn't get worse, the babies that were flushed tried getting back into a body and into some of the men's bodies. You see, we use certain types of chemicals that have been newly designed to clean our toilets automatically. It's also clear that these chemicals also preserve life when they shouldn't carry on. I think we're going to get rid of these toilet seats now. I've always hated life and existence, and I never wanted to be born. I still did amazingly well in life, as I'm a programmer now for many large companies, the likes of film companies and even the army, and I earn an amazing salary, but existence is so tiring. I hate getting up in the morning and existing and experiencing everything. I have so much resentment towards my parents for bringing me into this world. And now I have to pay bills, get a place to live in, and get a job. I tried exercising and joining other weird groups to help me love life and accept my reality. I don't want medication or see any kind of therapist, as they will just try and force me to accept existence. I then had another good idea, and that is to bribe my parents to kill me in the most peaceful, painless, and swiftest way possible. I told my parents how I resented them for bringing me into this world, and now I want them to kill me for 10,000 at first. My parents were hesitant at first, but more towards the amount of money, as they thought that it wasn't enough. I went back to my life of work and pretending to smile at parties, pretending to care about people's relationships and babies. Once again, I couldn't take it anymore, as existence was nauseating. I went to my parents and bribed them £20,000 to kill me. This time, they seemed more likely to accept it, but they thought that it just wasn't enough. I went back to my life, watching pointless drama shows and reading people's pathetic posts on social media and celebrities being cringy. Every time I wake up, I become disappointed that I am existing again. And I went back to my parents and I bribed them £30,000 to kill me. You see, I'm too much of a coward to kill myself, but my parents have always been tough, and I know that they can kill someone if they really had to. I thought they were going to take the bribe, and I was so happy. For the first time, I loved my parents so much. Then they backed out last minute, as they thought that it wasn't enough, and I will still raise the money to keep on bribing them to kill me. I feel like I'm getting close. I hate being controlled, and for as long as I can remember, the feeling of being controlled was just so uncomfortable. As you can guess, I hated being in school. I didn't like conforming to rules. I like to think that I'm a free person, but the one thing that always had control over me was money. Money controls everyone, and it controls how people behave and think. I despised money, and for the last couple of years, I decided to become a homeless man. I never begged for money, and I went to food banks to cure my starvation temporarily. I felt more free as a homeless man than I ever did in my whole life. Whenever someone on the street would try to give me some money, I would start to accuse them of trying to entrap me into being controlled by money. I would fight them and curse them. They all think that they are just trying to be nice to me by giving me money, but I see right through them. They just want me to be controlled by money as they are controlled by money. Misery loves company, and I casually shouted at random people to stop thinking about giving me money. I am the most freed man as money has no control over me. I did some voluntary work to keep boredom at bay, but whenever a shopkeeper decided to pay me, even though I had decided to work on a voluntary basis, I attacked the shopkeeper for giving me money. How dare he try to get me controlled by money, and they are all evil, and whenever I try to do voluntary work anywhere, they always try to pay me. One guy who did some voluntary work in his security business tried to force cash in my hand. I grew angry and forced the cash down his throat, which killed him. I will never be controlled by money. Fuck money. Then recently, I realised how food has lots of control over me. And then I swore to myself that I will never be controlled by food ever again. So I've stopped eating. I don't know if this story is really creepy, but in hindsight, it potentially could have ended very badly. I must have been 7 years old at the time. Bear in mind, some parts of the story are pulled from my hazy memory. Right next to my old school, there was a public library that I would go to every day after school. I mainly went there because they had a computer lab. They also gave me a special table where kids could draw. I was doodling on a piece of paper, and suddenly this man walks up to me. He didn't seem or look threatening to me. He bent down and said, "Little boy, I see you ran out of crayons. Would you like to come out to my car and get some crayons out from there?" I wasn't the smartest kid when I was younger, I'll admit, but when he said that, I was smart enough to know that there was something very wrong. I was very, very scared. So I just said, "Well, let me call somebody real quick." He didn't seem too concerned about this. He just sat down and waited for me to be done. I asked the librarian for a phone and I called my mom and told her what this man told me. I don't remember much after this, but shortly after, the police showed up at the library and took the man outside to talk to him. I remember my mom and dad telling me how proud they were of me, which was no doubt coming from a place of being worried sick. I learned later that day that the guy apparently was telling the truth and was not intending to kidnap me. If this was the case, then I'd say that guy is not very bright asking a kid that question. Nevertheless, be sure to tell somebody if something like this happens to you.